Welcome to this latest edition of the ChUG podcast. Today we're discussing online training with Kathy Daniels, Rui Gardner, and Derek Davies. I wanted to start by pointing out that if you are interested in accessing any of the training material that we'll discuss in this presentation, you will be able to find them through a series of links that will be made available either on our website at ChUGcytometry.com, or if you're accessing this recording through the YouTube page, they will be in the description box below. It gets lonely on YouTube, so if you have any questions or comments, we'd love to hear from you. Also, if you have any tips on how you have moved your training online, we would love to learn how you are doing things in your facility. I hope you enjoyed the program. Talk to you later. Well, welcome everybody. My name is David Leclerc. I'm the host of the ChUG podcast. And I am here with Laura Johnston as a co-host. Laura is the Associate Scientific Director here at the CAT facility at the University of Chicago. Today's podcast, we are exploring what I think is a silver lining of this lockdown we all experience in the research world. While people were asked to stay at home, the Flow Cytometry community got fairly bored, it seems, and they redirected their energies in generating an insane amount of training material that eventually all then ended up on the interwebs. And so I think you'll find that elsewhere there's been a bunch of discussion on how people have translated their training program to a in-person to a online settings. I think what has not been discussed so far is what has worked, what is interesting, and what should be kept going forward. And our guests today are the crew behind the OpenFlow Cytometry initiative. They've been quite busy during this lockdown period. And so I wanted to poke their mind about this particular topic. So we're joined by Kathy Daniels, Derek Davies, and Rui Gardner. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you
for having us.
No problem. Glad to be here.
And so people are probably aware of who you are and the work that you do. But if you will, can you give us a rough introduction to who you are and how you see your impact in the training with your users? Let's start with Kathy.
So sure, I'll start. So hi, I'm Kathy Daniels. I'm currently the manager of the Flow Cytometry core facility here at the Whitehead Institute for Biomedical Research in Cambridge. So training and education has been something that's been pretty near and dear to my heart for quite some time now. And I've been involved in Flow for 8 years. And yeah, I'm just really excited to be a part of the OpenFlow initiative with Derek and Rui, and taking part with some initiatives in ISAC to really make education available across the board to everyone who's interested. And this opportunity to transition everything to a virtual platform has been really exciting.
Derek, you want to continue?
Yeah, sure. So I suppose most people here would recognize me as a core manager of many years standing in the Flow world, but I've sort of moved on a little bit from that. A couple of years ago, I was asked to specifically look after training in our core facilities or our science technology platforms at the Francis Crick Institute in London, which is where I work, because one of the thrusts of the Institute, if you like, is that it's very supportive of science outside the building. And one way we can do that is by educating and training in core facilities. So hopefully I can take all of the knowledge that I've gained over the past 35 or so years and translate that into something that's useful. So obviously I was starting to do that before lockdown. The lockdown gave us some opportunities to move what we were doing into the virtual environment, and OpenFlow was one part of that, which we'll be able to discuss, I suppose, in a little bit more detail in a moment.
Right. So yeah, I don't have as much experience as Derek, because I'm
you're not as old as me?
Right, I'm just turning 35 or close to that. So, no, so yeah, I currently run the Flow Core facility here at Memorial Sloan Kettering in New York. It's a big center, and it's interesting how, when you look at education, all the strategies that I had for years. So actually, I started really being involved in education and training with Derek when he invited me to participate in Flow Cyt, and then we were also running courses together with X-Cyt, and then even independently with other places. And I distinctly remember one of the most fun courses that we had was at the Karolinska with IAD that invited us on a yearly basis. And we were a bunch of instructors. And I remember we used to discuss a lot about, strategies and training, what would work best. I remember one of the things that was so clear to me at one point was that to engage people, I mean, you can be an engaging person, right? But typically people will get bored after listening to the same person, for an hour, right? And one of the things that really worked very nicely was to have different instructors, or several instructors, and that those instructors would interrupt in the middle, especially in the beginning. Like in the first half an hour, nobody asks any questions. People are still shy or nervous or something like that. And suddenly, when one of the instructors would ask a question, suddenly everyone would start getting involved. And that was really, for me, from then on, I started trying to get always at least 2 people involved in giving classes, which was, I think it's been working pretty well. And it works not only in the, in-person classes, but it works very well also with Zoom classes. And I think, or remote classes. I think actually it works better with the remote classes than in person.
Exactly. And education training shouldn't be passive. You need some interaction. You need that two-way process. And sometimes with more than one instructor, that helps, because it's different voices. You can ask each other questions. You can bounce things off each other, and that and bring other people in, and maybe they get to ask the questions that they wouldn't do otherwise. And
right.
That's what you want. People learn that way if you can answer their specific questions.
It's a connection with Tim Bushnell.
Mm-hmm.
I'm starting to see how Tim connects everybody in the flow cytometry world.
Probably the Kevin Bacon of Flow Cytometry.
Yeah, exactly.
Do you want to? Can somebody explain how the OpenFlow Cytometry came about? So let's start with what it is and how it came about, and what do you guys are planning to do with this platform?
Okay, well, I suppose what we wanted to do was to try and marry the two things that we'd been doing independently. So you're training users in theory, and you're showing them the hands-on work. Obviously, that became more difficult after last March. So I got in contact with Kathy and Rui. Obviously, I've known Rui for a long time. Kathy, not so much, but I knew she was a very keen educator and very good at training. And to try and marry those two things together in a virtual environment somehow. So if you've been to any of the OpenFlow webinars that we've done, you know that it's a combination of a little bit of theory, a few slides. We go to the machine. We try and fill in the gaps that you wouldn't necessarily be taught, even by a manufacturer. Those things that aren't really codified, and to try and make it as informal as possible, so that people can ask as many questions as they like. And I think one of the great things as well is the fact that we can put all these recorded webinars onto the YouTube channel, which gives people the chance who couldn't make it to actually do it and contact us. That's very important. Making those connections, I think, is very important.
Yeah, and just to add on that, it's been really great to see people reaching out and asking questions and being able to have those conversations with people worldwide, essentially, that'll reach out to our account. And because we keep it open access and free for everybody, it's really an open session. And that's where the name kind of stemmed from. Open access, free. We encourage everyone who can and wants to join and want to cover as much content as we possibly can.
Right. Yeah, there's so much to say about this. To be fair, when the lockdown started, everyone, I think most people thought about, okay, what are we going to do now? And how are we going to take advantage of this time that we're at home? How can we do, for instance, maybe start working on those webinars or or classes that we were all thinking about. We all are involved to some extent in this, but I'm sure that most of us have these ideas, but putting these ideas into practice is a different thing. And I to be fair, we thought we were going to have a lot of time, but we didn't have, things still were very busy during the lockdown. But I remember distinctly Kathy taking the initiative, thinking about, look, this is the things that we wanted to do, and let's do them. And I remember saying, please, by all means, go ahead. And she started, doing these virtual classes, again, based on the fact that, hey, let's try and show something in practice, either in front of the instrument, but especially with the software. So we started with some webinars on FlowJo, where she was actually doing a practical session, just analyzing data for people to understand how to work with FlowJo, And we had already a YouTube channel, so that was very easy to, just start uploading those videos there. And I think I should mention here that this is one of the most important things. It's not just creating the content, but then placing it in a way that people can access very easily, and then follow. So every time we had a new video, anyone that's following, they can be notified that they have a new video. And then so we started getting really active with this, and again, all of this was initiative of Kathy, and it was very interesting that at some point Derek actually reached out to Kathy, and not to me, that he's known me for years, but he actually reached out to Kathy, asking her, do you want to be involved in this other initiative, right? That then we termed OpenFlow. So I thought it was really great, because it not only shows that it's important to have these kind of activities for people to learn across the world, and Kathy just mentioned that the feedback that we've gotten is really impressive from people all over the world. But also it does show that you just have to do a few of these things, and in terms of promoting your facility, but also your own self, right, is actually quite nice. And I think Kathy very quickly became a known flow cytometrist around the world, and that people now reach out to her for questions and for doubts. So I think it was really nice. It shows here a lot of perspectives of how you can provide something very useful to the community, and at the same time you learn and also you promote your own brand, let's put it that way. So it was really nice how all this came about.
And we have a similar experience here with Laura, who's been the brain behind our blog on our website. She's been writing most of the most successful blog posts, like their series of bad data is something that's, whenever it comes out, is kind of a hit, and that brought a bunch of interest from several people across the field.
Yeah, those are great.
Thank you. They're fun, kind of a different perspective on training, I guess.
Yeah, but I think it's important that we have different ways of getting these messages across as well. That's what education training is all about, because not everybody learns in exactly the same way. Not everybody has the time to watch a 90-minute video. So having those sort of bite-sized things as well is important.
Exactly.
So the other thing I find impressive with the OpenFlow is that you managed to produce one training every month so far, or roughly. I find that generating content over and over again gets to be difficult, and you very often fall off the wagon. Just in your mind, like, how far do you think you can continue bringing content on this platform?
No, we're done. That's
done.
Yeah, we've run out of ideas. When we started, actually, before we actually did our first webinar, we did send out a sort of questionnaire or a survey of what people wanted in terms of education. So we do have quite a long list of that. Right. So we've obviously started with the ones that seemed most popular. We haven't even touched really on specific applications yet, and we've only just about to start on data analysis, which is of course a huge field. Yeah. So there's life in it yet. And to be honest, we are providing content each time, but it doesn't take a lot to fill 90 minutes if you're trying to explain this to a lot of people who are very new to the field. And a lot of reiteration goes on. And of course, you're fielding and answering questions as you go through. So I think sometimes we over prepare the number of samples and things to run because we run out of time.
So I wanted to use this OpenFlow platform and your experience with it as a way to jump into just technically how has been your experience going online. So I'm understanding you've had some experience before the lockdown, but like, would you say that it's been increased quite a bit during the lockdown, or is that something that?
Well, for me, it's been completely that way, right, because my role is no longer actually in the lab, so I don't do any wet lab work. So it's all been to do with providing training. So in the first 3 weeks of lockdown, I had to completely change everything that I was doing to a virtual platform, and that's probably not enough time to do it properly. It's enough time to do something to get it up and running. And I've mostly been using Zoom for this, which is what most people seem to be familiar with. Other platforms, of course, exist for that, but whether that's going to be the right thing going forward is another matter. I think once things start getting back to a little bit of normality, we're taking a little bit of a backward step and reassessing how I'm doing this.
Right. So on that topic, what would you say, as I'm asking everybody here, what would you say works better online, or what is missing when you move to these kinds of platforms?
So I would. Oh, sorry. Go ahead,
no,
Darren.
I was going to say, David, that's a good question, because actually this is almost the subject of a tutorial we're doing for the virtual Cyto meeting in a few weeks' time. But whether you're trying to do theoretical training, whether you're trying to do hands-on training, of course, in the virtual world, there are lots of things that you can't get across. You're not going to be able to do those nuances. You haven't got that physical interaction with people. You can't pick up on whether they're bored or not engaged or not understanding as easily. So we're not going to be able to replace training completely virtually, that's for sure.
Yeah, and especially when taking into account hands-on training on instrumentation, right? So from our past experiences, in my time before the Whitehead, when I was at Sloan Kettering with Rui, we carried out quite a bit of hands-on training. At first, it was very slow, and then it ramped up quite a bit as we saw people see how it worked and it was beneficial, and they were able to get a really good understanding of how to operate the instrument if it was done correctly. So it works really, really well. But like Derek's saying, there's still some things that you miss out on when you're not in that physical space with the trainee, right? So some of those cues you don't pick up on, and it can be a little bit difficult, to kind of show certain instrument manipulations and all of that when you're not physically with the person. But that's where we can start using some pre-recorded videos and certain tools to be able to help out to facilitate. So ideally, those instrument trainings would be in person, but we do have the capabilities to do it, as long as we take advantage of some of the technology we have.
Yeah. To add to that, it's very. I think we've seen advantages and disadvantages of these remote capabilities. Of course, in person, especially, and it depends if it's hands-on or if it's just classes. For me, it's been more difficult actually with the classes, and I now I've reduced actually the number of classes that we're doing. We used to do many classes throughout the year, and now I'm just doing 2 classes a month, mandatory classes for cell sorting and to have access to the analyzers in the facility. And what I feel is missing is really looking at people, right? Understanding if people are, sometimes you look at somebody that seems confused and you try and you stop and you try to explain it better, or you ask that person, was it clear? And so you have the feedback from the audience. And actually, I've been thinking of, I wish I could have like an extra monitor where I could just put the faces, so everyone with the video on, and I could at least see them and be able to interact better with them, because they see me but I don't see them. So I think that part is missing for me. If I had that, I think it would be almost. I mean, you would still lack a bit of that interactivity, but I think it would be very, very similar to the in-person. Another thing that happens a lot with classes is at the end, there are some people that are shy, don't want to ask questions, and at the end they come to you, and you have a line of 3, 4, 5 people that want to ask questions. So that part I think we also miss, but it could still be, at the moment what people are doing is they send emails afterwards or something like that. Then in terms of hands-on, there are a lot of things that become a bit more difficult, right? Like, at least my experience has been, somebody puts the sample and you're waiting for the events to come up, and you're wondering, okay, it's not happening. So, and you start asking questions. Okay, so did you put the tube in the instrument? And they go, wait, where should I put the tube? Oh, okay. So let me see with the camera. And you go, oh, okay, yeah, you have to remove the water and then place the sample in. These kind of things.
I actually had a couple where the Aurora itself was just not turned on.
Right, exactly.
Like, oh, you have to turn on the cytometer for it to work.
Right. So yeah, these kind of things, or when you're in front of the instrument and with a person, you look at the sheet filter or something like that, and you see immediately, oh, there's air here, or and you can help the person to identify those problems. But if you're not if you don't have cameras everywhere, you're just mostly looking at the desktop, and maybe the person will have a camera, so you can see that person, but you're not looking at the instrument, right? So I think that part you miss a little bit, but overall we've had also very good feedback. I keep getting talking to people that have been trained, and they say, wow, this remote, I don't know if they're saying that this remote training is better than if it was in person, but they just say that it was really great. So it's been good, because I guess people will have the idea that, oh, if I do it remotely, it won't work that well. And it does work much better than the expectation. So I think that's the feedback that we've gotten.
And I think also it's going to help going forward, isn't it? Once we get back to some form of normality, is people are still going to have that idea that they can get some help remotely if they have some problems. They're going to be much more used to just phoning you up and doing a FaceTime or logging into TeamViewer or whichever way you do it.
Right.
They're more keen to do that.
One of the thing. Sorry, go ahead, Laura.
I was going to say, on the flip side, was there anything that has worked surprisingly better going remote? Like, I happened to hear from one person that said they thought their training actually was more successful and people were more enthusiastic when they did it virtually than compared to in person. Have you guys encountered that at all?
Well, I suppose people, have got to do it. They've got to do the hands-on thing. Sometimes if you're with them, maybe they're a bit reluctant. So you show me how to do it. And you end up doing 3/4 of the work for them. Whereas if you're not there, you're just a voice in their ear. They actually have to make that step.
I think in our case, go ahead, Getty.
Oh, sorry, I was going to say another really great benefit from transitioning to virtual or remote training is the capabilities to record sessions and have them uploaded to YouTube, or have them as a hard copy on a server or something like that, to provide back to the people who are getting the training, because they can go back and look and get reminded of exactly all of the content that was reviewed. And it's a really nice resource. And that's one of my favorite things from transitioning, to be able to go ahead and provide that, because people go back and they look at it and they find it to be very beneficial.
Yeah, we have at the moment, since we started this training, right, with Kathy, this remote training, we have over 100 videos on our YouTube channel. Of course, most of them are unlisted, so we just send the links to the people that have done gone through the training, and then they can, like Kathy was saying, they can go back and check, and that part is very useful. And I would add to the fact also that the remote capability allows several people to join, right? Whereas before, having 4 or 5 people in front of the instrument would be difficult. We're still doing one-on-one trainings. We believe a lot in that, to have individualized training. And this is I should say that this is a reference to a lot of other core facilities that say, oh no, we just have too many users, so we'll try to do this, with several people at the same time. We have 700 users, extremely busy facility, and we do one-on-one trainings with everyone, individual training. But I was saying the fact that you can have, for instance, staff also joining in and shadowing and seeing how the training is done, or even just looking at the recordings, the video recordings, is actually pretty useful.
Yeah.
And I think that's one of the things we gain with these remote capabilities.
And that's an important point, I think, because if you're running a large core, your new people are coming in the whole time. They're not au fait. They may have never done any training before, so it's an opportunity there. That's what we all have to look for, find those opportunities.
Yeah.
Right.
I think in our experience, we also reach more people. I'm not quite sure why that is, but like the online training attracts 10 people roughly per, like we present every other week, where when we were in person, it was half that number. And I suspect people have to find us. We're in the basement of this building and you need to walk all over the place and then find it. You have card access. And just, so that part I think helped.
Yeah, I don't know. So we have to be careful also when interpreting that, because and that's the difficulty I've had, and there are ways to get around it. But the difficulty I've had is understanding if people are actually attending, because a lot of people, just like the remote meetings, a lot of people will register and say, yeah, I'll join, and maybe they do join in their computer and they're doing other stuff in the lab or at home, etc. So whether they're actually there or not, I don't know. So maybe it's attracting more people, but I don't know if it's necessary you have more people attending.
There's attending and attending.
Exactly.
This is my next question actually. I've ended up YouTube threw a video at me. It's basically a professor explaining how to present to a classroom, and his first rule is everybody close their computer, close their phone. The attention will be provided to the person in front of the class. Like he basically, his point was essentially, once you're in front of a computer, your attention will be divided between absolutely everything that's on your computer. Like my email thing is open. I have 3, and I'm like itching. I'm just going now. I think that's another drawback of online training at this point. It's just this divided attention.
Focus, right.
Do your attendees turn their videos on? Or I guess I tend to do the Aurora trainings, and so people are reaching out to me specifically. And so the vast majority of my training sessions, although they're mostly like between 1 and 3 people, turn their videos on. But I wonder what your experience is with people turning their videos on while they're watching their.
I think it's a diminishing return to the number of people. Like you say, if you are doing a one-on-one or 1 to 2 or 3 people, they're more likely to do that because they want to try and get that interaction. But once you get to sort of even 20 people in some of the interactive webinars I've run, hardly anybody puts their video on, even if I ask them to.
Yeah.
Maybe when they say hello or goodbye, but not during it.
Right. That's what we tried to do that with, we thought of it because again, we want to make sure that people are attending these mandatory classes, right? And I still haven't figured out a good way of doing this. Kathy and I discussed, let's ask them to turn on their videos, but there are always people that will say, well, I can't, or my computer doesn't have video, and I have to have it on my phone, and so they don't turn it on anyway, right? So that wasn't the solution, although I think it's much better in terms of interactivity if you have the videos on. At least 15 people out of 20 turn on the video. That's already good, because at least you see 15 of those people. But for me, it's been more, I do have a big monitor, but it's just one, right? So I need another monitor to put those videos, so I can actually, I have a hard time because I have the chat on, I have the Q&A, and at some point Kathy was helping me, but then she left.
Yeah. So you very often need at least 2 people in there. If they are very interactive and are asking questions or filling in the chat, it's very difficult to keep up.
It is
with what you're doing. But I was going to say one way that I try to gauge that people are still awake, at least, is sort of put quizzes or polls in at various intervals, at least you don't necessarily know that they've been paying attention, but at least they know you replied.
Right.
If I've got 20 people, I get 18 responses. That's good enough for me.
We've done that.
Only 2 are asleep.
We've done that. Like, if people want to ask questions, and I think that's also an important thing, right? And we've done this with OpenFlow, and we do this also with other classes. We allow, and that's the advantage of live versus recorded, right? If you have a live session, it allows people to ask questions at that time, right? And they can get an answer for that specific question. So what we do is we have the Q&A, and then I will ask questions during, to try to make it interactive. And I ask people to write their answers on the chat. And so everyone can see the answers. And we actually have a very small discussion. Sometimes it can take 5 minutes or 10, which is nice. People will throw out some answers. I start questioning those answers, or saying, oh yeah, no, that's actually a good point. And then I talk about something else, and then more people will add to that discussion. So I've seen that's successful to have more interactivity and make it closer to what we would have.
Yes, and I think that's what we tried to do with the first, all of the OpenFlow sessions as well, isn't it? That we would ask questions that we know the answers to, but the sort of questions that a new person should be asking, which is why it takes so long to get through our sessions.
And oftentimes that triggers more questions, right? So like you were saying earlier, it makes people feel more comfortable, and it facilitates the conversation, and it allows more like open dialogue. I've been very lucky in the sense that I've been doing most of my virtual training is like with hands-on and instrumentation. So my requirement is always that you need to have video and audio connection in some format. So, at Sloan, we had a lot of our instruments set up with webcam and, microphone and speaker and all of that. But we also, before we were able to fully transition all the instruments with that hardware, we would have people bring their personal devices. So made sure that they were always ready to go beforehand, and communication's key there to make sure that they know that is a requirement before we get started.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah, we did have one user with a flip phone, right, or something like that.
Well, there was one user. There was one user that he didn't want to use Zoom, so he actually he FaceTimed me, and then his audio wasn't working, so he called on the phone, FaceTimed, and that was a special case. So, yeah. And then I was getting some phone calls after every time I went to use the instrument, but it all worked out.
So what I wanted to talk about as well is the quality of the content that gets generated. So I guess there's 2 things here. I kind of always think of this as some kind of form of entertainment. So you need to attract the people to pay attention to whatever you're trying to explain. And there's really good ways and really bad ways of going at it. And for example, you could do a 5-hour thing on compensation, would probably not be all that interesting. So what are your thoughts about this specific aspect of preparing training material?
Mm-hmm. Whether the content has changed or the way you provide that content or deliver that content, if it changes?
Yeah, I guess the content is one thing, but like just the way you present it to your
yeah, I mean, I'm sure the rest of you have also thought a lot about this. For me, again, with hands-on, like Kathy said, I think it was very straightforward. It was just more a matter of hardware to make sure that people, we could look at and see the face of the person, and also the remote desktop capability to for us to help people. Sometimes they can't figure out where the buttons are, and we can just go with a mouse or show something. So that was important. But in terms of, for me, the most difficult part was really providing classes. First, because we do have these mandatory classes that I mentioned. One of them is 3 hours and the other one is 4 hours. And so I thought, oh, damn, how are we? I just tried not to swear. I was gonna say something else.
Oh, Prateep dropped the F-bomb at some point.
Okay. As long as you edit it after and you put just a little beep. But yeah, so right. The difficulty here was to keep people engaged, right? How do I? And I remember the first class I gave, it didn't work very well. I was trying to use exactly the same strategy. So one thing that maybe most people forget is at least for me, I used to not have slides prepared for several things. I already knew by heart already, given so many of these classes. So I would go to the board and just draw, and it would help people understand better than just showing a slide, right? It's almost like having an animated slide. And so you go through as you're drawing things. And then the first class, I didn't think of it. I just realized, oh, where do I need to draw. And PowerPoint allows you to draw, but you're with your mouse trying to do a little curve, and even writing is very difficult. So so I struggle with that part, the way to deliver. I'm getting better with the mouse, and with the shortcuts, to be able to transition from that whiteboard or blackboard to the slides. So these kind of things, they change a little bit to maintain this interactivity. But again, the fact that I ask questions and people answer in the chat, helps a lot. It makes it more interactive. I asked everyone to give an answer, even if they don't know, even if it's just saying, oh, I don't know the answer to that, so that I also can monitor if they're actually there as much as possible. And it's worked. I think it's worked very well, and it's getting closer and closer to the real thing in person. But it took a bit of evolution there.
Mm-hmm.
I would add too, like, as making it as fun as possible is important, right? So kind of making it like interesting. So we'll put in like little poems or songs and stuff like that we've tried. It got a little busy, so we weren't able to do that much, but little things like that brings people in and it engages them, and it makes them feel a little bit more comfortable. So I think as fun as you can make it while also focusing on the content, the better.
That's fun. Sorry, that's funny. Oh yeah, go ahead, Derek. Go ahead.
I was going to say a 4-hour course, Rui, that seems like a lot of time in one go. I mean, you do have to think about how you deliver this, in what sort of sized fragments you do it. I mean, I do half-day courses as well, which is like 3.5 hours, but we try and make sure that there are breaks in there and there's something to alleviate the learning experience, because there's only a certain amount that people can take in one go. I mean, it's great that you do have these things later on video, but
right.
If they get full up with knowledge, they don't ask questions.
Right. So here's another thing that was also more difficult to do with remote. Again, if you start doing the same class over and over, you have these jokes that you always put, and you already know these jokes by heart, and sometimes I'm not even feeling funny, but I'll tell the joke anyway, and people laugh, and oh, okay, so you just continue. It's kind of, I feel like a stand-up comedian, right? Probably after so many jokes. But the problem that I had was, and especially at first, I would say exactly the same joke, because it would come as the slides were going through, and then I realized that I couldn't see anyone, and it's horrible. And I've heard stand-up comedians mention this, that doing the remote, it's difficult. You don't see the reaction of people, so I don't know. It just comes across very, very strangely.
I would say that's less difficult than when you're telling a joke in person and no one laughs. I would prefer the remote joke where you just don't know.
Yeah.
Exactly. No, I usually look at the only person. There's always one person that will laugh, so you look at that person and go, it was a good joke.
And what about on the technical side? And for example, I want to give a shout out to our colleague Aja Rieger in Alberta. She's developed some like lovely videos on her YouTube channel, like covering basically the same basics of cytometry, but I suspect she's using a quality camera, probably a decent lens. She has proper lighting, different shots, and she has little gizmo flying around the screen. So I suspect she's using some kind of broadcasting software to edit the whole thing. I think the first video she had some sound issue, fixed that for the rest of the series. What is your take on the level of investment people should make in the technology before putting stuff online?
Well, things that look nice are good, ultimately, but people are coming to that for the content and for the learning. So that's going to be the primary driver of this, I think. So, I've looked into this as well, into doing this professionally, because obviously we have various departments who are doing videos for fundraising and for teaching school kids and so on. But the amount of effort you need to put into that, it may be something that we do later down the line. But I think at the moment, I'd prefer to concentrate on getting the content out, the relevant content out to the people who want it.
Yeah.
And maybe with those things as well, it works better in the short 5-minute format or something like that.
Yeah.
Rather than the feature length stuff that we're doing.
Yeah.
But you still have questions about lighting and sound and
Yeah.
Right.
I think that's something we've all had to get used to, isn't it? Like, I'm having issues with my lighting here because the sun's out, which is unusual for England, obviously.
Exactly. No, I agree completely with Derek. I think that, well, so the more investment you put in, it's going to look better. And so it will help attract people and maybe help engage. But on the other hand, really what's important is the content, and that's what people are looking for. And in these kind of, I mean, if it was for entertainment, definitely, right? You need to invest in good quality sound and image. I think there's a minimum. If you have a very dark, like a huge backlight. So I've always had the problem here because I have the window, and when it's really sunny, that's why I had to get and that's why I had to get this little ring. It was a present actually, and because I kept complaining about it, but it helps to for people to stay engaged, right? But again, it's a minimum of nice lighting, a good sound. I remember there was a situation. Now I forget where, but there was a situation where the sound wasn't very good, and it was hard to. It was a meeting. It was a meeting. Exactly. It was one of these meetings. I don't know if it was MetroFlow or FlowTex. It was relatively recent, and at least a couple of people had very bad sound. So it was difficult. It was like they were in a very huge room and they were far away, and so it was so hard to keep focused and engaged. And I'm sure, and actually I commented this with other people, that we lost focus. We started doing other things while the person was talking. So I think that's actually important to have that minimum, but more than that, maybe not that necessary, but it's nice. It's good.
Yeah, I think it just needs to not be distracting. So like if there's like a single window and it's super bright, it's kind of like your eyes are sort of drawn to that really bright thing, and you might not focus on the information as much. Or if like the sound is really terrible, then you're thinking more about how it's hard to hear things and less about what the actual information is, which I think from my quick research, it seems like with the Zoom meetings, having an Ethernet cable is the more critical thing for not having.
So they say, although I've never given a Zoom meeting with a hardwired connection.
Oh, really?
It's all been on Wi-Fi.
Yeah, I even have my desktop now with wireless, just for technical reasons. But and I've been doing all these Zoom meetings without. But I agree. I mean, it's better to be safe than sorrow, right? And have a Ethernet connection.
I think in my case, it does show whenever I am not, when I'm trying to use our Wi-Fi and I try to record a podcast. Prateep had a lot of cuts in during the discussion, and that was all on my end.
Right.
The data was being recorded.
Well, you're in the basement, right? So.
Yeah. So we discussed how we can record the presentations, and I suspect you will answer no to this, but would you ever consider presenting your training as a recorded format, and just this is the training now, you just
I think that would be
yeah.
I think it depends on what it is. So what you could probably do, and what I like doing, is I like sending people OpenFlow recordings before they come for a hands-on training session.
Mm-hmm.
This will give you an understanding before you come to see what you might expect at the time of the training, right? So I like really using that. But for a theoretical training, it's really hard to gauge whether or not someone's actually watched it, whether or not, you know, they've actually understood the content. So I would steer clear of having it be something like that. Because even personally myself, I know a lot of the trainings that you get from any type of EHS department or something like that, kind of go through and take the quiz and say, I know the content, right? So whether or not people are actually going to participate if it's pre-recorded, you know, from my first facility, I wouldn't prefer that.
Mhm.
Do you get a good response of when you tell people, oh, if you can watch this video before your training? Do a lot of people follow through on that?
Good portion, yeah. We've had a good amount of people do it. Some people feel like they already know the content. So if they already have a prior experience utilizing technology, they might not be as willing to watch. So I keep it optional, right? But for people that are brand new, they're usually kind of hungry for content and wanting to have an understanding before they come.
For another perspective on that though, because there is an opportunity here, isn't there, to have a greater reach in your training or the material that you're providing. It's not necessarily just for the people who are going to use your facility or in your institute. It could be a much wider reach, not even nationally, completely internationally, because you know there are areas that just don't have that information available to them, and that is where the idea of having some sort of learning management system or e-learning and on-demand learning may be the way to go for some of it. I mean, ultimately, it's going to be a hybrid of all these things, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, we had conversations with, so the e-learning system here that we use is SABA, I think. I don't know how well known it is. But at some point we were going to transition to that, to be able to have recorded sessions where, you know, people would have to go through that, you know, mandatory for these mandatory classes. At least we would make sure that, yeah, these people could, that had attended or had watched the video. But I think, you know, I've thought about that. So we ended up not moving forward with that. And believe me, for me, I wish, you know, in a way, I wish I didn't have to do all these. You know, I'm the one that imposed that onto myself. But like next week, my week is so busy and I have 2 whole afternoons with these classes. And I wish I could just send them a video and say, look, watch this video. But even if there was a way of tracking that, it's still not the same thing. You know, the advantage, and we've discussed this with OpenFlow a lot, the advantage of having a live session is that people can actually ask questions there while they're learning the content, right? While they're going through the content. It's hard to engage for 3 hours watching a video, right? Unless it's a TV show. But this is not as engaging as that or entertaining as that. But but if it's live, you know, it's just a different, I don't know, it feels different. People are actually sitting and watching and asking questions. So I think it's much more valuable if it's live than recorded for these kind of classes, right?
I'll agree with that.
I would imagine it's probably more difficult for people to go do the recorded sessions as well, because they just sort of have to fit it into their schedule whenever, and you know, everyone's busy and you always end up prioritizing the things that have a set time, right? So
right.
Sure, I've got like a long to-do list of things that would be nice to do, but have no deadlines and no, but if there's a scheduled meeting, you know, you're going to show up at that time and deal with whatever is there. So if you have a scheduled training, you know, I think a lot of people are just...
But I think as Rui says though, that your diary can fill up quite quickly like that. You know, we have a mandatory theory session that's run every 2 weeks, and then think, well, actually I want to do a data analysis one as well, so let's put another one in, and suddenly your diary is full.
Yeah.
Or you've got to train other people to deliver that content.
Yeah, but funny enough, this is not something that came about because of the pandemic or because of the, you know, now the remote capabilities. We had the same problem before, right? We could have recorded all these sessions, and instead of giving the in-person class, we would just deliver the video, right? Just say, hey, watch the video. So we could have done this before. Again, we didn't do it because of the value of having an in-person, you know, an interactive class. Oh, by the way, another advantage that I see is that, people get to know you. I think this is very important, and we haven't really discussed, the importance, because I think it's pretty obvious, but the importance of education and training in core facilities. But for me, one of the important things is to set the tone, to set the tone of the expertise of the facility, right? If people see that, oh, wait a minute, this guy that's giving this introductory class, or this guy or gal, this person really understands the subject, and they're much more likely to go and ask for help later on, right? Than if you just deliver, I don't know, slides or videos or content for them to look at. The other advantage that I see is that you get to know people, right? You get to know the people that are coming into the facility, and for me that's very important. I lost this a little bit with now with the remote capabilities, but if I had the video of each one, it would be very helpful. But I think that's also one of the most important parts for us on our perspective, to meet people, and you would lose that if you would just have videos. I agree with Kathy completely in this.
Yeah.
Videos for people to watch before, like the hands-on training, is very helpful, but as a complement, right, as an additional tool.
Yeah, and I think also, so I just want to say, I think it could be looked at kind of from a fusion perspective, right, where you say that you have content available to complement Dark's point, where it has that international reach for people that do not have the resources to attend a course at their own institution, right? So there can be broadly publicly available content that you make available to anyone so they have those resources, but also have facility specific requirements to say you need to attend this live in order to get access within our facility specifically. So I think there can be that hybrid approach so that everyone benefits.
Yeah, I want to pile on Rui's points. I think it's the importance of in-person meeting. The basic training is this period of time that you can force the users to meet with you, and otherwise you're going to have to, the rest of, like, beyond that, whatever amount of time you have initially, you're going to have to fight to get that attention back. This is your time to present yourself and set the tone of the relationship you're going to have with your user base. And so if you use it to just show a VHS tape of a movie or whatever, like, it's, if you just waste it, then you're basically telling your users, well, I'm too busy for you guys. And so and I also tend to use my training to push some of my own goals. So for example, whenever we purchase new equipment, new technologies, the training will be designed to present these instruments and ultimately generate some usage, so that whenever I have to justify, like, to my overseeing committee whether or not the purchasing decisions we made are good or not, the training is definitely a huge part of that process.
Right. I agree.
Yeah. Going forward, so once we have all this content, my experience is that it tends to get lost in the interwebs. And my question to you now is, what are strategies we can use to make the content available, searchable, make people aware that it's around? I have in mind you might have seen an email that got on the Purdue list from one of our colleagues in LA, and she presented a series of PDF files. It was essentially a series of flyers about the technology that they use in their core facilities, and they were beautiful documents. They were well designed. The topic were on point. The content was great. And I exchanged a few emails with her, and she explained that essentially they cannot put the content on their website because of some policy administration, and so they're basically using these files, sending them in by email to their users, and that's pretty much where it went. So they kind of died there. So I feel there's a lot of content that got generated, and it would be really nice to be able to promote it.
But there is, and we don't want to get people to reinvent the wheel if there's something, if there's good content out there. So there is a problem with this and the sort of curation of good training materials, because there isn't anywhere to put them. You think of something like the data repository that we sort of still have, I suppose, which is very useful if you're looking at particular data files, but there's no equivalent for training material. Mm-hmm. Maybe there should be. Maybe that's what we need to head towards next.
Yeah, and there are some initiatives, like there's an SRL repository being developed with an ISAC. So that's going to be a nice resource. It's going to be peer reviewed essentially, or people can upvote or downvote.
That's the other thing, isn't it? You need some sort of triage of the content as well.
Exactly. And that's a hard thing in the community, because one lab might do things one way, another lab might do things another way. So there are, I think, plans to kind of bring a lot of that content together, and ISAC is even, they have the new education, the new educational website that they've got with a lot of content. As far as some of those files and generating content, I experienced the same issues at my first flow core, where I had a program where, so it's not flow posted. It was the Flow Fact Friday, we called it there, and put that program in place, and it was just one-page content for flow, and I couldn't share it publicly. And it was sad, because it's something that you work and you want to be able to share educational content that's not proprietary. There's nothing new or novel about it. It's just general content. So the inability to put it on a website or have it in easy viewable format is going to limit who can view it. And that's why being able to have a program like that and put it on a centralized source is really important for people to go back and reference and be able to have that content. And social media really helps. It really, really helps to be able to get people engaged and follow.
So we all use YouTube, don't we? But I have a slight reluctance to that, because if you search flow cytometry education on there, you find all sorts of nonsense. I mean, we'll be in there somewhere, but sorting the wheat from the chaff is quite tricky.
Yeah. I think getting back to what you said, Derek, about a more centralized repository of educational material. I guess that was the idea of ChUG with Isaac. So Isaac has tried that and has been doing it, and I think it's pretty successful. But the thing is, we can't stop the fact that there are many, hundreds or thousands of cores out there that want to provide their own content, their own way, right? And have different views of how to provide it, and actually have different views about the content itself. And so we can't stop that. And I think that's actually very useful. But then it's just like any other, informational problem that we've had, is that then you start having a lot of information and how to search it. There's a lot of noise. So the more content you have there, right, the more rubbish you also have. But also, the better things you have. So I think the key strategy here is good social media promotion, a good social media presence. That's what we try to do with here at Sloan when Kathy was here. So we started rolling out a Twitter account to be able to announce this. And the advantage of social media is that people can follow, right? So even YouTube channels. If people see that, oh, I really like the content of this, like OpenFlow or at MSK, right? If people like this content or like these webcasts, right? People can then follow and they'll get notified. And so they know that at least there's a good source there of information, right? And they can have different sources. So I think having a good social media presence is very important. It's hard to maintain. You have to have people doing this on a regular basis, right? Or else people that are following just will stop following. But it is very important to have that. And I think that's been very useful in maybe rising the good content above all the rest of the noise. But again, it's hard.
Yeah. It's one idea we had with the ChUG website is to just have, so we have a forum that is basically unused right now. It's just pile of nothing going on. So I thought we could use that because we have this vote up and down option. You could just put stuff in there and let people decide on what they prefer and downvote the stuff that doesn't work, vote up the stuff that does, and then you kind of.
But I like the voting, capabilities. Actually, so this was something that was rolled out at some point. Unfortunately, it didn't come into fruition. It almost did, which was kind of a revamp of the Purdue mailing list. So this was
Google Groups.
Right. Well, it had right. We had the Google Plus, right? That was created by Ryan. And so that was I think that was very successful. It was probably the best forum that was out there, at least in my opinion, where there was a lot of interactivity. And the idea that Rob Solomon had was to actually capture all the content that was going through Purdue, the Purdue mailing list, but display it just like the Google Plus way, so that people that would like to still use. And actually, that's another point I was going to make, is that we focus a lot on how to deliver the content, but people also have their own ways of receiving content, right? So one thing that may be very nice, CytoU may be very nice for a lot of people, but for some people, it just doesn't work. So allowing many others to do things in a different way ends up approaching many more people. I forgot.
You have to be careful that doesn't get a bit cyclical, though, doesn't it? That suddenly there's so many ways of doing it that people think, well, it's too bewildering. I won't do any of it.
Well, but look at the these, like the webcasts, like what Asia has been doing, the webcasts that Peter O'Toole has been doing. I actually, right, Kathy, I've been mentioning this for over, I don't know, 3 years, that I wanted to do, and I still want to do it. My idea was to do kind of like this, but just be the same. Do you guys know this radio show? What is it? The car talk?
Car talk, yes.
Right. So kind of like that. Just have two people discussing. So it could be through webcam or just sound. But the idea was to discuss things that are very controversial, right? Like tweaking compensation, changing the voltages to bring down the spillover values, these kind of things, whether they should be done or not, and just kind of provoke these be provocative, kind of launch these questions just to get people thinking about it, right? So there are a lot of different things, different ideas that people are rolling out, and they're actually putting them in place. So I do like that. And of course, again, it does create much more information, and some of the information is not that good. And so it creates a bit of background noise, but hopefully the signal to noise ratio will be better, will be improved.
I think that's one of the biggest issues, right? Like, misinformation and kind of going out there and seeing where that is and squashing it. I mentioned to Derek and Rui, I think at least a couple of times, I've been on Reddit, and there's a Flow Cytometry subreddit, and I read some things and I go, "Ee," and then I have my 2-page long response that I try and type out. But there is a lot out there where people will not have a good understanding of what's going on, and they might be getting bad advice, and they might not be aware of some resources that are out there, and that's one of the biggest challenges. How do you reach out to people?
Yeah, I see that ResearchGate.
ResearchGate is a big one, yes. Quite often go on there and see.
Yeah, I think
a lot of struggling.
Yeah, I don't know how we convince people to not need isotype controls to draw their gates. That's still, I literally just reviewed a paper, and I saw the other reviewers' comments, and they said, "Why didn't you use isotype controls for your gates?"
Right, but that's why we have to have something like that, like where experts will actually discuss this, but then how it's going to be delivered, how many people it's going to reach, etc. That's a different problem, right? But I think the way we've been doing it has been reaching out to many people, right? So at least that's working. Whether it's going to work as well in the future, we don't know, right? We have to adapt.
I think it helps that we cross promote each other. So I've been presenting the information. Like on my Twitter page, we try to push whenever you guys present something, and in other groups that we feel produce interesting content. I think that's a way to like.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, to increase that signal to noise ratio, right?
Have you ever thought about targeting specific groups? I mean, this is kind of different from the virtual, but I know something that we've considered, we haven't quite put into motion yet. Or we were about to roll it out, and then the pandemic hit and kind of messed everything up. But at least, again, I'm also coming from the brand new spectral technology and trying to get everyone on board with that. But the thought of like targeting PIs specifically and trying to train PIs on what this new technology is, because there's also like the ongoing training, right? So a lot of PIs got trained years ago and they have lots of experience, but then you've got this brand new technology like spectral, and they've never heard of it and they don't know all the ins and outs of it, and maybe they need some training as well. Have you ever?
Good luck with that.
Yes, yeah.
That's the definition
That would have been my
PI.
line as well.
Exactly, is that they're not trainable anymore.
Yeah. They're the ones who want the isotype controls.
Exactly, they're the ones reviewing.
I think they're just having conversations and working with them individually. So not the official training, but opening the dialogue is really important, and that typically tends to help you get to the point where you want to be at, to have them disseminate within their lab, to reach out to the core and follow the appropriate policies, because that's happened multiple times in the past where I see something questionable, and maybe the researcher isn't really that open, and I go to the PI and I have a conversation to say, this is the impact of this poor practice, and then it's not done anymore, because you can say this is impacting this paper that you want to put out, and if I saw this, I would have a huge red flag, and then that typically tends to change the perspective of the PI.
Yeah. I think most of them are receptive to that. They don't want to be trained in new technology, but they'll go on our advice, and if we target the postdocs, show them that they're the ones who have to get trained on it. This is going to improve your PI's body of work and the way he's progressing, but the PIs themselves may be a lost cause.
Yeah, I agree.
I guess that's sometimes the issue too, is like within the lab, the postdocs take on the training. So, the new grad student comes to the core facility, they go through the required training, and then the postdoc does the continued ongoing training, because, it takes a while to become fully proficient in flow. So it's, again, that kind of goes back to the, getting people to feel comfortable coming to the core and getting to know the people in the core so that they can come to us for questions and ongoing training, as opposed to relying on, other people in their lab who may not have kept up to date with all of the current practices, or maybe they were trained by somebody else who wasn't the best.
Right. That sort of goes back to what Rui was saying earlier. I think, it's important that users understand that you are experts in that sort of technology, and it's a two-way process, and it's a partnership.
Yeah, one strategy, and it depends on the institutional culture, is to go to lab meetings, right? And present. This is something that might happen, especially in the beginning when you first come to an institution, but even having that once in a while, like to present a new technology, such a full spectrum. To be able to, at least you'll grab the attention of the PI, right? And that's if it's in a lab meeting.
So I've done that the other way around as well, as I've got the PIs to come to our lab meetings and explain their sort of research strategy, how we fit into that.
I don't know. We might be surprised at some point and realize that these PIs are all on TikTok. That's where we need to go. Let's see.
Yeah, that's the one place we haven't gone yet.
Once Flow Cytometry ends up on TikTok, I think we're going to break it. It's going to be
exactly. Maybe I'll start putting some content there.
Yeah.
Although my friends have jokingly called me a Flow Cytometry influencer now.
Nice.
That's it. A t-shirt.
It is true.
Like, oh no, I don't want to be an influencer.
We're approaching the end of our time together. Is there any topic you guys wanted to bring up that we have not covered yet, or that you feel strongly about?
I mean, I don't know. I actually have a lot of questions because these things are very new, right? And
Yeah.
we're still exploring all this stuff. I mean, one of the things, and this is probably more of a social aspect of all this, is that I think that almost everyone would agree that during this pandemic, time has, the notion of time has changed a lot. And I think is, at least my opinion, is mostly due to these remote capabilities that now, this is an advantage. Like in the next OpenFlow, I may be in an airport while we're doing things. So you're available everywhere, right? So you're kind of working all the time. Although I look back and I was working all the time. So even without remote capabilities, but for some reason, you don't have to walk from one office to another, from one building to another. And I was just thinking of the lab meetings that, now people can always attend lab meetings, even if they're, in a doctor's appointment. Mm-hmm. Technically they can, they just have to turn on their phone and they're listening to the lab meeting. So, I see a lot of advantages in these remote capabilities, and even in a hybrid format, allowing a lot of people to join, etc. But on the other hand, it is also, we're generating all this content and providing this, and people are going crazy with it's becoming too much. Like all the videos that you listen, all the webinars, all the meetings, it's just a lot. And for me, a remote meeting is not as, that for now has been really far from what an in-person meeting is. We're losing all the networking part, which for me was probably 80 or 90% of the whole meeting. So I don't know what you guys think about it.
I agree with that. I think initially we had a lot of webinars available and it was fairly easy to schedule them. And going forward, we still, hopefully a limited amount of time that we're still going to be away from these in-person meetings, but we're back at work, and this idea that I can spend 4 hours watching stuff on, it's just not happening anymore. I can't follow anything that's in that format.
You need time for TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, you need time for that.
That's sort of what I was saying earlier. We probably have to stand back a little bit in a few months' time and see, what's worked well, what's going to change when we start going back to work and people aren't going to have the time to plug into this. What's left standing at the end of that.
Yeah. And it's hard with the conferences, right? With there's a 4-hour virtual conference, but you're still present in your normal work location, right? So you turn on the conference, but then maybe you get some emails, you start answering those, or you're in lab and somebody's, cytometer broke or something. So then you don't really actually pay attention to everything like you planned. Whereas like if you actually went there, then you would pay attention to everything.
Yeah, I think we're all missing that.
Yeah, very much so.
Not that you would pay attention to everything, but if you're not being able to focus, you can go out and have a drink with several other people that are not being able to focus, right? And you end up, it's not lost time, right? You end up doing quite a good amount of networking. We used to do that a lot, right, Derek?
Yes, those are the days.
Those are the days. Exactly.
One last thing I wanted to bring up too as well is I think the importance of having vendor support for education and training as well, especially for new instrumentation. So I think there are some vendors that are fairly strong in doing that and having publicly available content, but I would personally like to see all vendors do that for instrument training, and to be able to have easily accessible, very clear videos on how to operate instrumentation, because then that kind of negates the need for individual core facilities to record all these videos, and it's coming from one common source. Mm-hmm. Something I would like to see.
Yeah, right. Definitely.
Yeah, that's good.
So if they're watching, this is what we want.
Exactly.
Yeah, maybe that would help with some of the misinformation too, if people.
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe we'll add more, but but I agree.
From an operation perspective, I think it would be great.
Exactly.
Right. All right, I'm going to finish up by saying that for listeners, if you visit our YouTube page or our webpage at ChUG cytometry.com, we'll have a series of links where you can find the workings of Kathy, Derek, and Rui. And at this point, I just want to finish up by saying thank you again for sharing your inputs and your thoughts about the training. It's been a lot of fun.
No, thank you.
Indeed, thanks for
Yeah,
inviting
thank you
us.
so much.
Yeah.
Thank you.